The mysterious child. The night was cold, and the wind howled through the ruins of the battlefield. Smoke still rose from the crashed alien ships, their metal bodies twisted and broken. The war between humans and the unknown invaders had finally ended. Earth had won, but the price was high. Cities destroyed, millions dead, and strange wreckage scattered across the land. Jake Carter, a former soldier, walked carefully through the ruins. His boots crunched over shattered glass and pieces of alien technology. He had fought in this war for years, and now that it was over, he didn't know what to do with himself. He wasn't looking for trouble. He just wanted to salvage anything useful before the government took control of the wreckage. Then he heard it. A sound, small and weak, coming from the wreck of an alien transport ship. It wasn't the sound of metal breaking or fire burning. It was crying. A child's cry. Jake stopped. His heart pounded. It couldn't be a human child. There were no civilians here. Was it some kind of trap? A wounded alien? He gripped his pistol, stepping closer, his eyes scanning the darkness. Then he saw her. Curled up in the shadows, near the remains of the ship's control panel, was a small figure. She had pale, silver-blue skin and glowing violet eyes. Her hair was white, falling in messy strands over her face. She looked no older than 5 or 6. She was shivering, clutching a piece of cloth around her tiny body. Jake's instincts screamed at him to walk away. This was an alien child. She could be dangerous. Maybe her kind had killed his friends, destroyed his home. He should leave her here. But he didn't. Instead, he knelt down slowly, lowering his weapon. "Hey, can you hear me?" he said softly. The child flinched, pressing herself against the broken ship. She didn't speak, but her glowing eyes locked onto his. Fear, pure, raw fear. Jake sighed. "I'm not gonna hurt you, kid." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a protein bar. He unwrapped it slowly, showing her that it was food. Hungry. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, cautiously, she reached out with shaking fingers and took it. She sniffed it, then took a tiny bite. Her eyes widened, and she quickly ate the rest. Jake watched her carefully. She was definitely not human, but she looked innocent, weak, alone. Where were the others? Why was she here? He pointed at himself. Jake. He tapped his chest. Jake. The girl blinked. Her small lips parted, and she tried to speak. Key. His eyes widened. She was trying to say his name. "That's right," he said. "Jake." The girl hesitated, then touched her own chest. "Luna." Jake frowned. Was that her name, or just a word in her language? Either way, it was something. "All right, Luna," he said. "Where's your family?" She just stared at him, her eyes darkening. Then, slowly, she raised her tiny hand and pointed up, to the night sky. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. She wasn't from Earth. She had no one here. A sudden noise made him turn sharply. In the distance, lights flickered. A government recovery team was moving in. If they found Luna, they'd take her. Study her, maybe worse. Jake clenched his jaw. He wasn't a hero. He was just a soldier trying to survive. But something about this child, it didn't feel right to leave her. She was alone, just like him. "All right, kid," he muttered. "Come on." He scooped her up gently. She was light, too light, like she was barely there. She didn't resist, only resting her small head against his chest. As he carried her away from the wreckage, he didn't notice the faint glow spreading across her skin or the strange symbols appearing on her arms. He didn't hear the whisper of an unknown language in the wind. But something had changed, and soon the world would know. Not an ordinary alien. Jake Carter had made a decision. It wasn't a smart one. It wasn't the safe one. But it was the only thing that felt right. Luna, the strange alien girl, was now in his care. He had no idea what she was, where she truly came from, or why she was alone. All he knew was that she was scared, hungry, and helpless. And that was enough. The long walk back to his cabin was tense. Every sound in the dark made him turn his head, his fingers twitching near his pistol. If the government found out he had taken an alien child, they'd come for him. If her own kind were looking for her, they might be worse. But Luna? She didn't seem worried. She clung to his jacket, her glowing violet eyes watching everything with quiet curiosity. Jake lived in a small cabin deep in the woods, far from the remains of the war. It wasn't much, but it was safe. Isolated. No cameras, no neighbors, no one to ask questions. As he stepped inside, he turned on the dim lights and placed Luna down gently on the old couch. She looked so small against the worn-out fabric, her silver-blue skin shimmering faintly under the light. Jake sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "All right, kid. Let's figure out what to do with you." Luna tilted her head, watching him. She still didn't speak much, just a few words, mostly copying him. Jake sat across from her, pulling out an old first aid kit. "You hurt?" he asked. She didn't answer, just stared at him with those big glowing eyes. He gently reached for her arm, expecting her to flinch. She didn't. Her skin was cool to the touch, almost too smooth, like polished stone. "No wounds," he muttered. "At least, not on the outside." Luna looked at his hands, then at her own. She turned her palm upward and blinked in surprise, as if noticing something new. Then, for the first time, she spoke a full sentence. "You are not like them." Jake froze. Her voice was soft, almost musical, but the words were clear. She spoke English. Not broken, not struggling. Perfectly. He narrowed his eyes. "What?" She tilted her head again, studying him as if trying to understand something beyond words. "The others. They fight. They break. You do not." A chill ran down Jake's spine. "You mean humans?" Luna shook her head slowly. "No, the ones from the sky." Jake's breath caught. She wasn't just talking about humans. She was talking about her own kind, or something else. "Who are they?" he asked carefully. Luna lowered her gaze. "Hunters." The word hung in the air like a threat. Jake exhaled sharply. So she was being hunted. By whom? And why? Before he could ask more, the lights in the cabin flickered. The room suddenly felt heavy, like the air itself had thickened. Jake's ears rang slightly, and his skin tingled. Then Luna's arms started glowing. Symbols, intricate, shifting patterns, appeared on her skin, pulsing softly like veins of liquid light. Jake shot up, grabbing his pistol. "What the hell?" Luna didn't move. She simply looked at her own arm with a strange calmness, as if this wasn't new to her. Then the glow faded. The air returned to normal. Jake stood frozen, his heart pounding. "Okay," he said slowly. "You want to explain that?" Luna looked at him, then down at her hands. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then whispered, "I don't remember." Jake lowered his gun but didn't put it away. "You don't remember what?" She shook her head. "Who I am. What I am. But I know things." "What kind of things?" Luna glanced at the table next to her. There was a broken radio sitting on it, one Jake had meant to fix for months. She reached out, placing her small fingers against the cracked casing. A faint hum filled the air. The broken parts of the radio vibrated, shifting slightly. Then, before Jake's eyes, the radio reassembled itself. The cracks sealed, the wires reconnected, and the speaker let out a burst of static before settling into a low hum of white noise. Jake took a step back. "You've got to be kidding me." Luna pulled her hand away, looking down at it as if she, too, didn't fully understand what she had just done. "I know things," she repeated softly. "But I don't know why." Jake stared at her. This was beyond anything he had ever seen. A child that could speak perfect English in hours. A child that could fix broken technology with just a touch. a child whose body glowed with strange symbols. And she was afraid of something. "The hunters," he muttered. "They're coming, aren't they?" Luna didn't answer. She didn't need to. The way she curled into herself, the way her glowing eyes darkened with fear, that was enough. Jake took a deep breath, then rubbed his face. Damn it. He was just a soldier, not a hero. He didn't know what the hell he was getting into. But one thing was clear. Luna was no ordinary child. And if the hunters were coming for her, they weren't going to get her without a fight. The hunters arrive. The night was too quiet. Jake Carter sat on his porch, staring at the tree line. His rifle rested across his lap, his fingers lightly tapping against the metal. He had lived in isolation for years, but tonight, the silence felt wrong. The forest wasn't supposed to be this still. No wind, no rustling leaves, not even the sound of distant wildlife. Something was watching. Inside the cabin, Luna sat on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest. She hadn't spoken much since her strange display of power. The radio she had fixed earlier played a soft static hum, but she didn't seem to notice. Her violet eyes stayed locked on the wooden floor, lost in thought. Jake turned his head slightly. "You feel it too, don't you?" Luna's fingers curled into the fabric of the couch. Slowly, she nodded. "They're here." Jake exhaled through his nose. He had spent most of his life on battlefields. He knew how to recognize when an enemy was moving in. And whatever was out there, it wasn't human. "All right," he muttered, standing up. "If they want you, they'll have to go through me first." Luna looked up at him then, her glowing eyes filled with something Jake couldn't quite place. Worry, fear, or something else entirely. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They are not like you. They do not stop." Jake checked his rifle, chambering around. "Lady, neither do I." The first sign. It started with a flicker. The lights in the cabin dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again. The radio crackled violently, the static shifting into a strange, warbling sound, like distorted voices whispering over one another. Luna tensed. Her small hands gripped the couch tightly. "They are close," she murmured. Jake cursed under his breath. "How many?" Luna's head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she closed her eyes. And the air changed. The temperature in the cabin dropped. A pressure settled against Jake's chest, like something unseen was pushing down on him. His ears popped, and for a brief moment, it felt as if the entire world had gone underwater. Then, outside, the tree line shifted. Something moved. Jake raised his rifle, his heartbeat steady despite the tension. The moonlight cast long shadows across the clearing. A mist had begun creeping through the forest, rolling in unnaturally fast. Then he saw them. Dark figures, tall and unnaturally thin, stepping through the mist. Their skin was a metallic black, almost like liquid metal. Their heads were elongated, with no eyes. Just smooth, featureless faces. They moved in complete silence, their bodies shifting as if they weren't fully solid. Jake counted at least 5, maybe more in the trees. They stopped just at the edge of the clearing. Watching. Waiting. Luna's breath hitched. She grabbed Jake's sleeve. "They are reading you," she whispered. "What?" Jake kept his aim steady. "They do not see with eyes. They see thoughts." Intent. Her fingers tightened. "They know you won't give me up." Jake smirked slightly. "Dan right." One of the creatures stepped forward. A deep, unnatural voice filled the air, not from its mouth, but from everywhere at once. "Surrender the child." Jake didn't blink. Not happening. The creature's head tilted, as if confused. "She is not yours to keep. She's not yours either." Silence. Then, the creatures took another step forward. Luna suddenly gasped, clutching her head. The symbols on her arms flared to life, glowing brighter than before. The air grew heavier, crackling with unseen energy. Jake could feel it now. Something old, something wrong pressed against his mind. His vision blurred at the edges, dark shapes creeping into his thoughts. Whispers crawled through his skull, trying to force their way deeper. He gritted his teeth and fired. The gunshot shattered the unnatural silence. The bullet struck the nearest creature and passed through it. The thing rippled like water, its form distorting before solidifying again. Jake swore. Figures. The creatures didn't flinch. They simply continued forward, their movements eerily slow, patient, like hunters who already knew their prey was trapped. Luna's breathing grew rapid. They will not stop. Then we run, Jake growled, grabbing her wrist and pulling her toward the back of the cabin. He barely made it 2 steps before something shifted. The air twisted. The cabin's walls flickered as if reality itself was glitching. The door in front of them stretched and melted, warping into something unrecognizable. Jake yanked Luna behind him, his grip tightening. "Any bright ideas, kid?" Luna's eyes flickered. Her expression changed. Fear was still there, but now there was something else. Determination. She turned toward the creatures, raising her hands. The symbols on her skin pulsed in rhythm, their glow spreading across her arms like living energy. The creatures stopped. For the first time, they hesitated. Luna's voice was small, but firm. "I am not yours." The glow on her skin exploded outward. A pulse of energy rippled through the air, hitting the creatures like an invisible wave. The mist around them shattered, the unnatural pressure lifting. The creatures recoiled, their bodies flickering, distorting wildly, as if they were being forced out of existence. Then, just like that, they vanished. The silence returned. Jake exhaled heavily, lowering his rifle. His shirt was soaked in sweat, his muscles tensed like coiled steel. Luna swayed on her feet. He caught her before she collapsed. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They will return." Jake didn't doubt it. He looked around the cabin, now warped and damaged from whatever had just happened. He sighed. "Yeah, well, next time. I'll be ready." Luna's glowing eyes flickered up at him. "No," she said softly. "Next time, we will be." Jake raised an eyebrow. Then, for the first time since he found her, she smiled. And for some reason, that unsettled him more than the creatures ever did. The escape begins. The forest was no longer a place of safety. Jake had never been one to run, not since the war started, and especially not now. But after the encounter with the alien hunters, he knew something had shifted. The game had changed. Luna wasn't just some helpless child. She was a key to something larger than he could comprehend. They couldn't stay in the cabin. It was too vulnerable, too exposed. Even if the hunters didn't return immediately, the world had just begun to realize that Luna was no ordinary being. The government would be looking for her, and whatever the alien species was, they would never stop. Luna had barely said a word since the attack, but Jake could tell she was afraid, more afraid than he had ever seen her before. Her usual calm was replaced by an almost frantic energy, her violet eyes darting around, watching every movement in the trees, as if expecting something to leap out at her at any moment. But she said nothing. Jake packed quickly, taking only what he could carry: food, water, weapons, and a few odd pieces of alien technology he had found during his time scavenging. He didn't know if any of it would work, but there was a chance. "Time to go," he said, his voice rough with urgency. Luna didn't respond. She stood by the door, staring into the woods with a look that unsettled him. "We're not safe here," Jake repeated. "We need to move fast." Without saying a word, Luna stepped outside, her feet barely making a sound on the forest floor. Jake followed, keeping his eyes peeled for any sign of movement in the distance. The cold morning air cut through him, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of branches in the wind. He could feel it now, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. Luna wasn't just a child. She wasn't even just an alien. She was something more, something ancient and powerful. The way she had repelled the hunters, the way the energy had pulsed from her, It wasn't a coincidence. Luna was something the world had never seen before. They walked for hours, deeper into the woods, with Jake constantly glancing over his shoulder. He had no idea where they were going, only that they couldn't stay where they were. Luna didn't speak, but he noticed her head moving slightly as if she was listening to something. Her eyes were glowing faintly, scanning the horizon. At one point, she stopped, turning toward him. "They're tracking us," she said softly. Jake's heart skipped a beat. "How do you know?" Luna's eyes narrowed as she scanned the area. "They are close. They know you are protecting me." Jake swore under his breath. The hunters were already here. He had to think fast. "Do you know where we can go? Someplace safe?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. Luna paused, her expression distant. I think I remember something," she murmured. "Something buried in my mind." Jake's mind raced. If Luna was remembering something, it had to be important. "Tell me." Luna closed her eyes for a moment, and Jake held his breath. She was trying to concentrate, trying to pull the pieces of her past together. I remember a ship," she said finally. "An old one, hidden deep beneath the surface." Jake's stomach turned. "A ship?" Luna nodded, her voice barely audible. "It's the key. It's where I belong." The words hung heavy in the air. "Where?" Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Luna didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned back toward the woods. "We must go. Now." The urgency in her voice was enough to make Jake spring into action. He had no idea what she was talking about, but if Luna said they needed to go, he wasn't going to waste time questioning her. They began walking again, faster this time. The path ahead was rugged, and the dense trees seemed to close in around them. Jake could feel the weight of the forest pressing in, the air thick with the sounds of distant creatures, but it didn't feel like a natural place. It felt wrong, like the land itself had been altered. They stopped only when Luna held up her hand, signaling for Jake to be quiet. She was staring off into the distance, her eyes glowing brighter. "They are coming," she whispered. Jake turned his head, scanning the area, but he saw nothing. The forest was still, and the air was eerily quiet. "They're here," Luna repeated. "They are close." Suddenly, Jake felt a tremor in the ground beneath him. It wasn't much at first, just a slight vibration, but then it grew stronger, like something massive was moving beneath the earth. "Stay down," Jake ordered, pulling Luna behind a thick tree. He crouched low, trying to steady his breathing. The ground shook again, louder this time. Luna's face was pale. "They are close. They know we're here." Jake's eyes darted back and forth, his hand gripping his rifle tightly. "How long do we have?" Luna shook her head. "Not long. We need to move." He nodded. It was clear the hunters weren't the only danger here. Whatever Luna was leading them toward, this ship of hers, might be the only hope they had of surviving. But getting to it would mean crossing a perilous path. "Stay close," he said firmly. Luna nodded. Her expression was hard now, a look of determination on her face. Jake had never seen her like this before. It was as if she knew exactly what they were up against. Together, they continued through the dense forest, Luna's glowing eyes leading the way. Every few moments, the ground trembled again, but this time, Jake felt it in his bones. Whatever was coming, it wasn't just after Luna. It was after everything. They had no choice now. They had to find this ship, and fast. But as they moved deeper into the woods, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just running from the hunters. They were running from something far worse. And Luna was the only one who could stop it. The truth about Luna. The night had fallen silent once again, but the air was heavy with something unseen, something unspoken. The forest was no longer just a place where Jake and Luna sought refuge. It had become a maze, a tangled web of secrets, and in the distance, something ancient was waiting. They had traveled through the night, moving at a fast pace. Luna led them through the dark with an uncanny certainty, her glowing eyes acting as beacons in the wilderness. Jake kept his guard up, his senses stretched to their limits, every snap of a twig or distant rustle of leaves making him jump. The hunters weren't far behind. He could feel them, even though he couldn't see them. But Luna, she didn't seem worried. In fact, she seemed almost calm. Jake couldn't understand it. After everything she'd been through, the hunters, the strange powers that flowed through her, she was still leading them into the unknown, as if she had all the answers. He had no choice but to follow, but the questions were piling up in his mind faster than he could keep up with them. Where was this ship she spoke of? How did she know about it? And why had she never mentioned it before? They reached a clearing just as dawn began to break, the first light of morning casting long shadows across the forest floor. Luna stopped suddenly, her feet planted firmly in the dirt. She was staring at the ground, her expression distant, as if she were listening to something far beyond the trees. Jake took a step forward. "What is it?" Luna didn't look up at him. "We're close," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Jake frowned. Close to what? Her gaze shifted, and for the first time since they had met, there was a deep sadness in her eyes. To the truth. Jake's chest tightened. This wasn't the first time she had hinted at something hidden beneath the surface of her words. He wasn't sure what it was, but the more he saw of her, the more certain he became that Luna wasn't just an innocent child caught in the crossfire. "You don't have to be afraid, Luna," Jake said, trying to reassure her. "We'll figure this out." Luna finally turned to him, her eyes full of something ancient, something far older than her childlike appearance suggested. "You don't understand. I don't have the answers. I can't tell you everything yet." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Luna bit her lip, her small hands clenched into fists. "I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always alone." Jake's confusion deepened. "What are you talking about?" She looked away, her voice shaking. "I was born to a people that no longer exist. We were the Eldari, an ancient race from beyond the stars." Jake stood frozen. Eldari. He had heard rumors of ancient civilizations, but this was something different. "You mean you're a survivor?" Luna nodded slowly. The Eldari were a peaceful race, a people who had learned to live in harmony with the universe. But we were betrayed. The ones who came after us, the hunters, they destroyed everything. They killed my people and erased their existence. Jake felt a chill crawl up his spine. The hunters were worse than he had imagined. They had destroyed not just one civilization, but entire races, cultures, histories, everything. "How are you still alive?" Jake asked, his voice rough. "Why didn't they kill you too?" Luna's eyes darkened, and she looked down at her hands, where the symbols glowed faintly. "Because I am the last of the Eldari. I am the key." The words hung in the air, and Jake felt the weight of them press down on his chest. "The key? To what?" Luna's voice trembled as she continued. "I don't know why, but I was saved. I was hidden, kept in a place that the hunters couldn't find. But now, they know I'm here. They know I survived. They're coming for me, not just because of who I am, but because of what I carry." Jake didn't speak for a long moment. He didn't know how to respond. The implications of Luna's words were too much to process. She wasn't just a refugee or an orphan. She was the last of an ancient, powerful race, and the hunters were after her because of what she could unlock. "What do you carry?" Jake asked, his voice low. Luna closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in concentration. "I don't know all of it, but inside me is the power to awaken the Eldari ships, the ones hidden across the galaxy, the ones they tried to destroy." Jake's mind raced. If what Luna was saying was true, then the hunters weren't just after her. They were after the Eldari technology. Technology capable of unimaginable destruction. "So, the ship you're leading us to," Jake said slowly, It's one of these hidden ships. Luna nodded, her expression hardening. Yes, and if they find it, they will use it to destroy everything. They will wipe out humanity and every other race they find. They are the last of their kind. They need me to unlock what's inside. They think I don't remember how to do it, but I do. Jake's pulse quickened. The weight of Luna's words hit him harder than anything else so far. If the hunters got their hands on that ship, they would have the power to destroy entire worlds. The balance of the universe could tip into chaos, and Luna was the key to everything. She could either end it all or save it. Jake swallowed hard. Then we can't let them find it. Luna's eyes flickered with something that resembled fear. But I can't do this alone. The ship is calling to me, but I don't know how to control it. I need someone to help me. Jake stepped forward, his resolve hardening. Then we'll figure it out together. Luna's eyes met his, and for the first time, Jake saw a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. The final stand. The world around them was collapsing, but Luna and Jake had no choice but to stand their ground. The shadows of the past, the weight of the future, pressed in on them from all sides. The distant rumble of the ground beneath them was growing louder, and the faint, eerie hum of unseen ships filled the air. The hunters were closing in fast. Jake's mind raced. He had never been one for flashy tactics. He wasn't some hero in a story. He was a soldier, a survivor. And the only way out of this was to fight back. But even now, with all he had learned about Luna's true nature, he wasn't sure if his tactics would be enough. Luna stood beside him, her violet eyes flickering with an intensity he had never seen before. She was no longer the frightened child he had found in the wreckage. She was something more, something ancient. And whatever this final confrontation was going to be, she was ready. Jake could see the change in her. Her body wasn't just glowing anymore. The symbols on her skin pulsed with an energy that felt like a living thing. She was tapping into something deeper now. Something primal. "Luna," Jake said, his voice low but firm. "You've got to control this. If they get us, it's all over. We need to stay focused. I need you to focus." She nodded, but Jake could see the tremble in her hands. She was scared, no matter how much power she held. Fear was something that couldn't be erased by glowing symbols or ancient knowledge. It was raw human. "I can't do this alone," Luna whispered. "I can feel them. They're getting closer. The ship, the power inside me. It's calling to them." Jake felt a shiver run down his spine. "We're not alone," he said, his voice growing steady. "We're in this together. I'll protect you." Luna's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, something shifted between them. It wasn't just an understanding. It was a bond, a shared purpose. In that instant, Jake knew he wasn't just protecting her. They were fighting together for survival. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. The ground vibrated again, stronger this time. Jake's teeth rattled as the deep hum grew louder, the sound of a massive engine reverberating through the earth. He didn't know how much time they had left before the hunters found them. He had to act fast. "We need to get to the ship," Jake said, gripping his rifle tightly. "Where is it? Can you feel it?" Luna's hand trembled at her side, but she nodded. "I can feel it. It's close, but it's more than just a ship. It's a weapon." "Then let's make sure we get there first." They began to move, weaving through the dense forest, stepping lightly but quickly. Luna's glowing eyes lit their way, but the shadows seemed to press in tighter with each step. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as the earth rumbled beneath him. The hunters were coming. But this time, he wasn't just running. He wasn't just hiding. This time, he was going to fight. Luna's steps quickened as they reached the clearing where the ship was supposed to be hidden. The trees parted, revealing a massive shape in the distance, a hulking, dark structure half buried in the earth. Its sleek, curved form was almost organic, pulsing with a strange energy that seemed to ripple outward. Jake couldn't believe it. This wasn't just any ship. It was a relic, something ancient and powerful, far beyond human technology. "They're almost here," Luna said, her voice breathless as she started to run toward the ship. Jake followed close behind, his pulse hammering in his ears. Every step felt like a countdown, every breath a fleeting moment. He had no idea what this ship could do, or what it could unlock, but he knew one thing: if the hunters reached it first, they would have the power to destroy everything. As they approached the ship, the ground began to tremble harder. The trees around them bent, as if the very earth was bowing to the force beneath them. Luna reached out with her hand, her eyes glowing brighter than ever, and the ship responded. The massive doors of the ship's hull groaned open, revealing a dark interior pulsing with light. "Go," Jake urged, his voice sharp. "Inside. Now." Luna didn't hesitate. She darted inside the ship, and Jake followed closely, slamming the doors shut behind them. The interior of the ship was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It was vast, empty, yet full of an ancient energy. The walls seemed to breathe, shifting and alive. A strange, humming sound filled the air, and in the center of the room stood a glowing pedestal. Luna approached it, her hands trembling as she reached out to touch it. The moment her fingers made contact with the pedestal, the entire ship seemed to come alive. The floor beneath them vibrated, and the walls began to shift, revealing more hidden passages and rooms. "It's responding to me," Luna whispered. "It's awakening." Before Jake could say anything, the ship's massive door slammed shut behind them, and a voice boomed from the walls. It wasn't a voice he could hear. It was a voice that spoke directly into his mind. "Intruders detected. Power systems activating." Jake's heart skipped a beat. He spun around, but Luna was still focused on the pedestal. The walls around them were changing, shifting into a new form. The ship was coming to life, and it was only a matter of time before the hunters would be able to track them here. Luna's voice trembled as she spoke again. "It's ready, but I don't know how to control it." The ground shook violently as the voice spoke again. "Warning. Hostile forces detected. Activating defensive protocols." The air in the room grew thick with energy, crackling with power. Jake turned to Luna, his hand gripping his rifle tightly. "We need to hold them off," he said, determination in his voice. "This ship might be our only chance to survive." Luna nodded, her face hardening. "I will do what I can, but we must fight." Just as she spoke, the doors at the far end of the chamber exploded outward. The hunters were here. Jake raised his rifle, but Luna's hand shot out to stop him. "No," she said. "They will not stop, but I can." With a flash of light, the ship's interior surged with energy, and the hunters were thrown back. But Luna's face twisted with pain as the power surged through her. The glow around her intensified, her body trembling under the weight of the ship's energy. Jake rushed to her side. "Luna, stop. You'll kill yourself." But Luna's voice was steady. "I won't stop. Not until they're gone." As the ship came alive around them, Jake realized one thing. This was no longer just about survival. This was a battle for the future of everything. And they were the only ones who could win it. A new future. The battle was far from over. The ship groaned under the strain of the energy that surged through it, its ancient systems kicking into life with violent power. Luna's body was barely holding up as she struggled to contain the overwhelming force. Sweat dripped down her face, her small form trembling with the effort of controlling the raw energy that was flooding the chamber. Her glowing symbols pulsed brighter, matching the ship's hum, as if the two were somehow bound together. Jake crouched beside her, his heart pounding. The air around them crackled, charged with the kind of power he had never felt before. It was like standing at the heart of a storm, but the worst part was knowing that if Luna lost control, even for a moment, the entire ship could implode, or worse, unleash a devastating weapon on everything around them. "Luna!" Jake shouted, his voice barely audible over the noise. "You can't keep this up." Luna's eyes flickered toward him, but there was no sign of fear in her gaze. There was only a fierce determination that Jake hadn't seen before, not even during their darkest moments. She had become the anchor of this ship, the last vestige of the Eldari race, and that made her more powerful than anything Jake had ever encountered. "I have to," she gasped. "I have to protect us. The ship, it's the last weapon. The hunters want to destroy everything. They can't have it." The ship's walls flickered again, and a massive rumble shook the room. Outside, the ground trembled as the hunters advanced, their unrelenting force pushing them closer. Jake didn't have much time to think. He grabbed Luna's hand, feeling the heat radiating from her skin. "Listen to me, Luna. You don't have to do this alone. We have the power now. You've awakened the ship. It's on our side. Let it help you." Luna's gaze was distant, her breath labored. I can't control it completely. It's too much for me. I am the key, but I don't know how to." Before she could finish, the ship's systems hummed with renewed intensity. The floor beneath them shifted, revealing a massive control panel that had been hidden within the ship's core. Lights flashed across its surface, and symbols similar to those on Luna's body began to glow. The ship had recognized them both. "You can do this," Jake urged. "You're not alone. This ship, it's a part of you now." Luna's eyes widened, and a new understanding crossed her face. She straightened up, her grip on the pedestal tightening. The energy around her began to settle into a steady, focused hum. The power was no longer erratic. Instead, it seemed to be flowing through her, not as a force to be contained, but as an extension of herself. Her voice, quiet but filled with certainty, spoke through the ship. "I can feel it. The energy is mine to command. The hunters, they'll never reach this place." The ship's hum grew louder, almost deafening now. The entire chamber shook as the ancient vessel came fully to life. In an instant, a brilliant beam of light shot from the ship's core, breaking through the ceiling, tearing through the forest above. The beam was not destructive, but its sheer force sent a shockwave through the trees. Jake's eyes widened as the light pulsed once more, creating a force field that surrounded the entire ship. It was as if the ship had created a protective barrier, a shield that nothing could penetrate, not even the hunters. Luna staggered back, her breathing shallow, but her expression was one of awe. "It's working. It's actually working." But Jake's relief was short-lived. In the distance, he could see the hunters. They were not backing down. Even with the ship's defenses in place, they were determined. They were relentless, and they would stop at nothing to claim the weapon inside. The rumble of the earth shook the very foundation of the ship as the hunters made their final approach. Their figures were barely visible in the mist of the surrounding trees, but Jake could feel their presence. The ground was no longer just trembling. It was being torn apart by their force. "They're coming," Jake shouted. Luna's grip tightened around the pedestal as she closed her eyes in concentration. The ship hummed louder, and the air around them crackled with energy. "I can't hold them off for much longer. I need help. I need you to." But before she could finish, a roar echoed through the clearing. The hunters had arrived. Jake could see their figures moving through the mist, their glowing eyes fixed on the ship. They were preparing for the final assault. Jake turned to Luna, his voice firm. "I've got your back. I'll buy you some time." Luna's eyes flashed with gratitude, but there was no time for words. The hunters were closing in. Jake ran toward the nearest opening, taking up position behind the fallen tree trunks that had been scattered during the battle. He wasn't a fool. He knew he wasn't going to be able to hold them off for long. But Luna had unlocked something here. She had awakened the ship, and he wasn't going to let it all fall apart now. As the first of the hunters came into view, Jake took a deep breath and fired. The shot rang out through the stillness of the forest, hitting one of the alien creatures directly in the chest. It staggered backward but quickly righted itself, its body warping in the air as it adjusted to the blow. Jake didn't hesitate. He fired again, and then again. But the hunters were relentless. They weren't afraid of him. They had a single purpose: to capture Luna and take control of the ship. Luna's voice rang out from inside the ship, her tone filled with determination. "I'm ready. I'm going to finish this." The ship's systems flared brighter, and the ground beneath them trembled with the force of the energy gathering within the ship. In that moment, Jake realized something. Luna wasn't just the key to the ship. She was the key to unlocking a future where humanity could survive and thrive beyond the reaches of the hunters. Suddenly, the ship erupted with power. A massive surge of light shot out in every direction, a shockwave of energy that blasted through the hunters. The force knocked them off their feet, sending them flying back into the trees. Their cries echoed in the air as they scrambled to regroup. But it was too late. The ship had activated its core systems, and the protective barrier surrounding it was stronger than ever. Jake watched as the hunters fell back, retreating into the darkness. They weren't defeated. No, they would return. But for now, they had been pushed back. And in that moment, Jake realized the truth. The ship wasn't just a weapon. It was a new beginning. Luna, breathing heavily but smiling weakly, turned to Jake. "We did it. They won't be able to reach us again." Jake nodded, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "We're not just surviving anymore. We're building something." Luna stepped closer to him, her eyes gleaming with hope. "This is just the beginning. The Eldari are gone, but their legacy isn't. We can rebuild together." As the light from the ship slowly dimmed, the future felt uncertain, but not hopeless. For the first time, Jake realized that Luna was not just the last of her kind. She was the first of a new chapter. And this time, humanity wasn't alone.